Do you remember watching Norm Abrams on the New Yankee Workshop and thinking, gosh, I wish I could do that full-time, quit my job? Maybe just start doing that part-time? Maybe you have no idea who Norm Abrams is because you were born in the 90s or the 2000s. Perhaps you watch Bourbon Moth Woodworking on YouTube and you think to yourself, I could do that. He's really not that funny, or he's not that skilled. I would probably disagree with that, but so why don't you? Why don't you turn your woodworking hobby into a full or part-time business? Welcome to Working at Woodworking Podcast. That is what we are all about here. Last week we talked about production work, how to make 100 of something without losing your mind. The week before that, episode 20, we talked about prototype work. Should you do it? This week, we're going to talk about your standard operating procedure, or SOP. Wow, I turned this into a series. I have a theme. I must assure you that was purely by accident. This was not planned. I am not that smart. So, what is your SOP, your standard operating procedure? This is a set of instructions on how you are going to do work. You might think that is frivolous to even come up with something, but after you do this for a few years, things kind of fall into a routine, and then you start forgetting parts of that routine. Or maybe you made an XYZ for somebody, and then 5 years later, they or someone else came back and asked if you would make another XYZ. Okay, now you're scratching your head. Oh, geez, how did I do that? What material did I make that from? Did I use a table saw, or did I use the router to cut that out? And so on and so forth. If you actually had written something down, you wouldn't be racking your brain to try to figure out how you did that. You would go over to a file, maybe pull this up on a computer, and say, oh yeah, I remember. I did A, B, C, Z, and it was done. So that is your SOP, your standard operating procedure. You don't want to always have to be reinventing the wheel. This will save you so much time and material. And here's another thing. Maybe you've kind of become famous for making a particular product. You've made a lot of them over a number of years, and you get hit by a bus. Who's going to make that particular product again? If you had a set of instructions, detailed instructions written down, somebody could come in and pick up where you left off and at least have some idea of how to go about reproducing this thing that you used to do. Maybe you have children who are a doctor, lawyer, accountant, and you've got a pretty good idea they're only going to do that for a few years. They're going to burn out, and maybe they'll want to take over. Here is a set of instructions that you can leave them that shows exactly how you made something. This would be incredibly valuable to them. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. You've written the instructions down. Okay, so let's get into this. You need a set of instructions that if you were to hire an employee, you could give the employee these instructions, and providing they have the basic skills, could go out and do what you do. I know not as well as you do. You've been doing this for 20 years or something in their first day. Give them a break. But if you approach creating your SOP with this idea, you can see what needs to be written down and what you might not want to include. Number one, first thing, a shop drawing. Now, this could be a sketch. This could be a set of architect's blueprints, but you need a picture of what you create. I'm old school drafting, so I make, an isometric drawing. I make side views, top views, end views, whatever I need to convey the dimensions and the shape of the object that I'm building. Younger folks who are skilled in the computer arts can do this on a computer. I am so struggling with that at this moment. By the way, any listeners out there who are well versed in FreeCAD, please contact me. I just have questions. So many questions. Nah, I don't need drawings. That's for those fancy people. Yeah, okay, fine. Go ahead and violate my shop drawing inverse rule. That rule states that the time saved not doing a set of drawings is inversely proportional to the time spent fixing all the mistakes you're going to make by not having a set of shop drawings. So, hey, if you want to fly without wings, you go right ahead. Free country. Who am I to say how you should do your business? In addition to the shop drawing, you will need a materials list. Now, most materials lists include things like red oak lumber, 12 feet long, minimum 6 inches wide. Sheet goods, 1 sheet of 4x8, 3/4 inch redwood plywood, so on and so forth. That's great. That's where you start, but you also need to include where did you get this material from? Remember, if you have to reproduce this thing 5 years down the road, you may have forgotten where you got this in the first place. Include everything that goes into the product. The board feeder material, all the sheet goods, what stains you used, if any, what type of finish you used, what type of parts, if there's something unique. Maybe it's a particular drawer pull or hinges. What type of hinges did you use on this product? Drawer slides. Were they side mount, full extension? Were they under mount, full extension? Were they the El Cheapos you picked up at the hardware store? Include all of these materials that go into the project. And then include some type of, volumetric measure, such as I can build 100 of these from 12 board feet of hardwood. That will come in very handy whenever you're ordering material or trying to recreate this thing down the road. So now we get into our cut list. Number 3, the cut list is where you include the exact dimensions. You list each part, you list the quantity, and you list the dimension. And you also include any notes. A particular part you might need to cut to fit. I usually put an asterisk beside that number. I've got the rough number. It's going to be around 22 inches, but with that asterisk, I know to actually measure, it might come out to be like 21 15/16, and that can save you a lot of time. Grain direction may be something to consider. There might be some parts that are highly visible, and with just 3 minutes, 5 minutes extra time, you can turn a, oh, that's a nice piece, to a, wow, that is gorgeous. And the unique thing about that is the person saying that doesn't exactly know why it's gorgeous, but it is just pleasing to the eye and to the mind's eye. They may not actually see the matching grain at first, but the mind's eye does. And that's where you get that gorgeous comment as opposed to, that's nice. Next, you need to work on your order of operation. This is the step-by-step instructions that you go through. You can have a set of shop drawings, a material list, a cut list, but where do you start? There are some operations that have to be performed in a specific order. For example, if you are making a piece of wood that is 4 inches by 6 inches, hardwood, and they require a 1/4 inch round over on their edges, you would want to round over the end grain before the long grain, because you always get a little bit of breakout on that end grain. That will be removed when you route the long grain. If you did it backwards, where you did the long grain first, then the end grain, that breakout is going to be very noticeable. And you're going to have to apply some sandpaper. You might have to do a repair. You might have to scrap that piece. So the order of operation on how you do things really matters in some products. These are things that you have learned by making 100 of these. And you've made note that I have to do this before I do that, or I will create a lot more work for myself. This needs to go into the order of operation. And just for pure efficiency, it might be something like cut hardwood material to 61 inches, plane to 3/4 inches, joint one edge, rip to 2.25 width, so on and so forth. Sounds like maybe we're building a cabinet face frame there. But by having that step-by-step instruction, you're going to save a lot of time just thinking, should I do this or should I do that next? Whenever it's written down, boom, you go from one step to the other step to the other step. Notice that I had specifics. 61 inches, 3/4 of an inch, 2 1/4 inch. Include those. Maybe you're cutting something at an angle at 17.4 degrees. Include that. You don't want to have to be recreating that halfway through, trying to make this product that you made 10 years ago. Save yourself time and aggravation. And the order of operation, it's going to change, because in your mind's eye, whenever you build this, when you're doing the shop drawings, you're going to be writing down the steps that you should be doing. Cut this, cut that, dado the third part so that the second part fits into the third part. Well, you might figure out that before I even cut those 3 panels, if I dado all the way across, then cut those out, the dado's already done. And it's easier to cut a dado in one big piece than it is into 3 or 4 small pieces. Little things like that. As you build these products, you're going to figure out the most efficient way. So your order of operation is very likely to change over time as you become more and more efficient. That's the real beauty of the order of operation. It really squeezes the most efficient process out of the job. Now, you're not quite done, because you're going to apply some type of finish. Write down a finishing schedule. What are you going to sand this to? 150? 180? Maybe take it to 220, then apply a stain. Maybe you have found that the stain actually looks better if it's only sanded to 150. Maybe you're using plywood and hardwood. The plywood has probably a 220 finish on it, so you either need to take your hardwood to 220 to create that uniform scratch pattern if you're using a pigmented stain. Maybe you only take it to 150 and then sand the plywood to 150 to make sure that you have a uniform scratch pattern over the entire product than having 2 mismatched scratch patterns. You want to write this down. What type of stain? What brand of stain? obviously, what color of stain? Did you thin this? What did you thin it with? How did you apply it? Did you use a rag? Did you use a foam brush? Did you dump it on, squeegee it, then wipe it down with cotton rags afterwards? Include this in your finishing schedule. Maybe you're using an HVLP sprayer. What are the settings? What tip size did you use? What was the setting for your volume control for the material? What was your air supply setting? Don't reinvent the wheel. You did this 5 years ago. It was beautiful, worked wonderfully. Don't recreate something that you've already done just because you don't quite remember. If you write it down, you don't have to remember it. And the final piece of your standard operating procedure is the packaging and shipping information. What size box did you use? Where did you get the box from? What quantity did you order last time? Or do you normally order? What type of packing material did you use? Were you using styrofoam peanuts, or had you switched to something else? Maybe newspaper. And any special instructions in the way you wrap and package this. Maybe you have to use bubble wrap on a certain part of it to give it a little bit more protection. Include this in your packaging and shipping SOP. Okay, so where are you going to write all this stuff down? Personally, I use a grid notebook. The one I like is made by a 5-Star Notebook. You can get them in any office supply store, Office Depot, Staples, things like that, or you can get them online. What I like about these grid notebooks is they have 4 squares per inch, hence a 1/4 inch for each square. It's very, very easy to do a full-size drawing, if obviously it will fit on a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, or it's incredibly easy just to scale it. 1 square equals 1 inch. That covers the vast majority of the products I build. Very easy to go to 2 inch per square. And there's 100 pages. In the notebook, there's a handy little pocket on the inside that you can, keep notes and things like that in. I generally go through one of these per year, and when I get a new notebook, I write the year on it. And then each year, I get a new notebook, and so I have a whole series of notebooks that contained all of my shop drawings, my doodles, my ideas. If I'm just brainstorming something, I grab the notebook and just do a quick little sketch. Now, the only problem with this is sometimes I'll sketch something one year and not think about it for several years later, and then can't remember what year it was that I sketched that out, and I have to go back through and flip through, which is kind of fun. You can see, how things have progressed. It's like, oh yeah, 2014, I had the idea to do that. Maybe I should finish that. Anyway, you can also use Engineer's Notebook. They have a 5-square ruled grid pattern. This is particularly handy if you are using the metric system, or perhaps you work in decimals of an inch, tenths of an inch. You can use a computer, a simple Word doc, or my favorite, a spreadsheet. And to be honest, everything kind of works together for me. I might do a rough sketch on something, a rough cut list, but then I'll transfer that into a spreadsheet where I can actually come up with the board foot. Or if you remember last week, we talked about the cutlistoptimizer.com. You can go ahead and enter that information straight into the optimizer, and it will spit those numbers out for you. And that's it. We're done. Now, do that for each product that you are making. So if you are making 10 different products, for sale, let's say on the web, you really need an SOP, a standard operating procedure, for each one of those products. One product might get dropped from your lineup one year, and 5 years later, you might decide to reintroduce that. There you go. You have the standard operating procedure on how you made that product. You don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel. So as a reminder, the materials list, the cut list, the order of operation, your finishing schedule, and your packing list are the key things you need to include in your standard operating procedure. Why? Well, you're trying to save time and make more money at this. And it's also helpful that you don't lose your mind trying to figure out how you did something, 5 or 6 years ago. Recommendation for the week: Travis at Shop Nation did a wonderful video on improve the workflow in your shop/shop organization. This is really what we were talking about, particularly last week, where we're trying to be efficient. We're trying to get tools close to the work area that you're going to be using. And he goes in and does a wonderful job in his video. Missed job. I got a call from a young man who was having some trouble with flooring. It was a repair, not new construction. And I'm so busy right now. I can't really take on new projects like this. And talking with him, he actually sounded fairly skilled. He had some tools. And I discovered what he really lacked was just how to go about making this repair. So I spent about 15 minutes with him on the phone, and we kind of figured it out. And he's going to tackle it himself. So, yay! I got out of a job. So I want to thank you for tuning in. This was a relatively short episode, which is what I was trying to do in the first place. And if you have any comments or complaints, criticisms, please contact me at roger@woodworking.com or give me a call at 812-325-9823. And I have added some Amazon links to the products that I talked about today. I became an Amazon affiliate. Ooh. And what that means is if you think it's a good idea to check out the 5-star notebook that I use, check the show notes. There's a link right there that will take you straight to Amazon. Click on that. And if you make a purchase, I get a very, very small percentage of that. Doesn't cost you a dime. Amazon just kind of kicks a little bit back to me for promoting their product. And this helps support the show, which it needs support. And if you are in the market for a business phone, check out the Unitel voice over IP system. It might solve your business phone problem by giving you a free business number of your choosing and separating your business phone from your personal phone. Anyway, thanks for listening, and until next week, happy woodworking.